Okay, onto our mold. I touched this up a little bit more and I sanded a little bit more, and I'm sanding through in a couple of spots, and I'm at this point, I'm either gonna make the whole thing over again, or I just, at this point, we'll just leave that. And I may make another one of these at some point, but this is fine for what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to stick this on some double stick tape. I'm going to trim away all the tape in the middle. Do I need to cut the middle out? I might as well. I don't know if the wow, that's a dull X-Acto blade. And we're going to place this right in the box. Right about like that. Now I have two Delrin rods, which are going to be the screw tunnels. Which will all make sense when the rubber's cast in there. So I have a can of mold release, which, to be honest, I've not really used before. I used to just make the molds. I'm going to take this off camera and spray it. Okay, that's left everything very shiny, which might actually help the finish. They say to brush it to get out any little entrapped air bubbles, but I think we're fine with that because there's not a lot of details in this. It's just smooth slides, smooth sailing ahead. Now I'm going to mix up some rubber, and we'll pour rubber in there. Okay, so let's put our scale on. And it should zero out to the cup. And I'm actually going to do this on ounces. Whoops. This is a ridiculously designed thing. The units is here, the on-off is here. You would think you're pressing units, but you are not. So this is a 5-ounce cup. So we're going to put 2.5 ounces of each part in here. I guess we'll start with A just because A comes before B. This is a equal 1-to-1 mix ratio. I think I need the whole 5 ounces. So blub, 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 blub. .2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5. Now we'll take this part up to 5 ounces. which is probably right to the top of the cup. I probably should have done a little less than that. Oh, there we go. Okay, now I'm going to stir this. We went a little over, but that's okay. I'm going to stir this for about 3 minutes. Okay, I've stirred this for 5 minutes. It kind of looks yummy. So they say 3 to 5 minutes, and that's 3 to 5 minutes. Now we will pour. Hopefully this is enough. If not, I'll just have to make some more. I did put water in this box to see how much water it held without the slug in there, and it was about 5 ounces. So okay, I just want to make sure we have enough over the top. You don't want to have it too thin. This is hard setting silicone. You can get different grades. Some of it's softer than others. Some of it's harder, and this is supposed to be self-degassing, so it doesn't need a vacuum. It's very, you can see there's some bubbles there. It's very, very watery, low viscosity. So that allowed whatever bubbles that are there, they're gonna come up to the surface, and we'll let that sit. What do they say here? They say, yeah, they said you should cover the master by at least 1/4 of an inch, which I think we're doing okay there. Is that 1/4 of an inch? Well, yeah, that's 1/4 of an inch. I think it's going to be okay. So that should be about 40 minutes for that to cure. So while we're waiting for that, I'll probably leave it longer than that. I'm going to start preparing my pickup winding area for the fun twirly parts. Okay, we're back a couple of days later. This is what we have. Let's see if I can take this apart. Do I want to pull these out? Oh, blobbo. Usually you build these into boxes you can totally take apart, which is clearly not the case here. This is an old Schaller box for a bridge or tuners or something. Let me see if I have a spatula. Maybe I could use a scraper. Nope, there we go. And hopefully I can pop this out without ruining the inside part. It's a wee bit tricky. I might not have gotten enough release agent. All right, let me try a few other things here. When you make a mold, the slug parts should have a draft angle, which is makes it easy to pull out of the mold. This does not. I think it's just sticking in the creases of the plywood in there. Well, I'm going to do this off camera so I can fuss with it a bit, and I will be back. Okay, after a little bit of fussing, I got it out. Here's the mold. What had happened was the inside isn't really smooth enough, and there's a little bit of a lip at the top, so it was getting stuck in the mold. I should be able to get the piece out. So the next part is we're going to put these Delrin rods back in, and we're going to pour some black resin. I could have had the bottom a little thicker than it is, but I think it'll be okay. I only have to make 4 of them, and then I can make another mold if I have to. I can modify this a little, but right now I just have to make 4 of these for the 2 P pickups, and then everything should be good. So now it's time to mix up a little resin. Okay, we're going to do equal parts A and B. I'm not really sure how much to mix, but we should get some wax paper out too, so we don't make a mess. But I don't know. I need my stirring sticks too. Got 2 minutes to mix this shit. Okay, I'm back. So we got 2 minutes working time on this. It says it's about 70 degrees in here at the moment, which isn't too bad. I don't really know how much that mold holds. I'm going to think that, okay, we'll go up to 15. I'll do 30, I guess. Hello, scale. It still says 14. Okay, now we're going to put in equal amounts of this one. So we're going to have 32. There we go. Now I have to stir this for a minute. We'll be back. Pour it in. Okay, this is getting warm already, so I'm going to pour this in now. And that looks like that should do it. It was way more than I needed, but it's hard to tell sometimes. And sometimes there's a minimum amount you can mix up, but I think that should do it. I'll bulge it out a little. That's good. We don't want that to run off that way. Whoops. Yeah, I mixed up way too much. Now I'm going to see if I can fill the gaps in around on this little routing template I made. I'm mixing up some Bondo, because why not? I put wax on this first. I'm not sure how I want to do this. Maybe I'll put this in the corners here first, like this. And then I'll press that in. I've not used Bondo before like this. It's starting to get stiff already. These two-part things don't kid around. Such a pleasant smell, not. It's quite vile, actually. Let's see if I press this in here. And then back here we can press it into the gaps. I think that's actually working out pretty good. Hopefully it does not get glued in here, because that would suck. That's not what we want. The mistake I made here was previously when I test fit this, I had it wrapped in wax paper, and I forgot to do that this time. Press it a little this way. That's the end of my clean sticks. Yeah, we'll see how that does. Terrible smelling stuff. I should have put gloves on, shouldn't I? Let's try demolding it. And the center section is a little problematic. Well, that was a chore, but here we are with our molded section that looked like the pickup. It's a little soft. I'm assuming it's going to harden up a little more, because I think this stuff gets harder. Now I have to get the Delrin rods out, which surprised me because they don't normally stick. You can see it has the same finish. Here's the wooden one, which has a little Bondo stuck on it, but it's basically looks just like it. Now I gotta try to get these rods out and clean it up a little. And there's one pickup. It's a little soft in the middle, which is a little disappointing. I've never cast anything this thin before. I'll just wait and see if it's going to get harder. Should be okay once the pickup bobbin is in there too. But there we have it. And here comes number 2. They say to mix this for a minute, but the very first time I did that, it actually started to harden before I could get a chance to pour it. You didn't see any of that because I didn't bother to leave it in. I'm going to assume that's mixed well enough. The mold's getting a little dusty looking, isn't it? Oops. So just rinse and repeat. This is number 4. It's gotten easier getting it to eject. Have to actually put my finger in there and pull it off. And there we go. Looks pretty much just like the original slug that we started with, the wooden one. Needs a little cleaning up. Things got in the mold at some point, and get rid of the yellow flare over here. And I got to pull out our Delrin rods, but that's number 4. Then we have I got a leg falling down. This is number 3, which a little rougher looking. A little Vaseline got down in the mold by accident. I'm going to clean up the bottom of this. The reason there was a little Vaseline in the mold was my misguided idea that if I smeared a tiny bit on with a Q-tip, it would make it easier to pull the part off that middle section. The problem was that the wooden model that I used for this wasn't smooth on the inside and had a bit of a lip where I glued the MDF on the top, and the molded piece was getting stuck in the mold, which was what was causing me so much trouble. But in the end, I just ended up making the molded piece look like smeary Vaseline on the sides. Nice and flat on the bottom now. It just has to be cleaned up. I might actually paint them. I might do black lacquer on them. Some of them have better finish than others, but I've been using some 400 and 600 and 800 grit sandpaper and some 4.0 steel wool to clean them up. I have a 16-inch radius block with some, I believe it's 220. And I'm going to clean up the tops of these, which have a 16-inch radius on them. This will get them nice and even and give a nice crisp edge. You can see they're a little off. The casting resin does get quite hard once it's cured. I thought it was softer when the first one, because it didn't cure long enough. But they do deform slightly. So that's nice and even now. Also a good gluing surface. If I continue to make these pickups, I will probably invest in a 3D printer. I think would be faster making this part that way. Well, actually, the mold's already made. It's 40 minutes and then I pop one out. Well, I've been leaving them overnight. A couple hours would do it. And that one's done. Here we have 4 of the cast pickup shells and the bobbins that are going to go in them, just like this. And then they're going to get covered on the top, so be covered pickups. Next, we're going to wind the coils. Okay, now we're going to wind some pickups. Get junk out of the way. I'm using 42 gauge wire, American wire gauge, AWG. This is nylon, the solderable nylon insulation. And I'm putting this in a bucket. Get it down on the floor. I had a piece of tape that decided to run away. I'm going to tape that right here for right now. This is my winder, which used to be a Shatton winder, which has been totally rebuilt. It's basically just the box. It has a DC direct drive motor now, and a speed control. The original speed control in the Shatton winder died, and they wanted me to send the winder to Canada, and then you know, they talked me into I thought it was the motor, buying a new motor from them, which was a very underpowered little DC motor, and that didn't fix the problem. And it was actually the kind of homemade speed controller, which was just like a voltage regulator kind of thing. It wasn't really a real speed control. This is a real speed control here now. This counter sucks. I can't really see it depending what the angle is. So I'm replacing that with an LED one. I'm gonna paint the whole thing and refurbish it a bit. But here's our bobbins. This is not really a course on how to wind pickups, but I'm going to show you how I do this. And you know, I will have videos in the future to get more in depth. Because these are plastic bobbins and not the fiber bobbins like you would find on a regular Fender pickup, they don't have the little eyelets to solder the wire to, so I'm using 28 gauge hookup wire, just like you would use on a humbucker pickup. And that's the way I'm going to do these. They do have holes, the bobbins. I've sanded off the flange, so there's still a couple of holes, and I suppose eyelets could be pressed into those, but I would speculate that soldering those would melt the plastic, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm using white wire as the start wire and black wire as the finish wire. That's what I do. Everybody does things a little differently, and this is the way I do it. So I have 4 of each here. I'm going to wind these first two pickups. If I was doing a regular P-base pickup with the fiber bobbins and the eyelets, it would be essentially the same thing, only without this hookup wire. I have my soldering station set for 400 degrees, which I believe that's Celsius. It doesn't say, but that's what I think it is, and that will melt the insulation on the wire. I don't sand it or do anything like that. You can use a disposable butane lighter if you want to do it that way and quickly, you know, pass it over the wire. I just solder it, and that always works. So this is pre-tinned wire. I'm going to add a little solder to it. If I can get my fingers to actually work. There we go. This kind of shows that you don't need a really elaborate winding setup. I've wound hundreds of pickups on this thing, both in its original state and the way it is now. It does not have a reverse motor function because I don't wind in reverse usually. If I really have to do that, I flip the bobbins over. And a little background in that, the reason why, like if you wind a guitar humbucker, like a PAF type of thing, you wind both coils in the same direction. The reason why Fender started winding the middle pickups on Strats in the opposite direction, because they didn't used to, they were all the same, is on a regular Fender type pickup with the fiber bobbins, the wire is touching the magnets. The magnets are not grounded. If the start of the coil is goes to hot and you touch the magnets that are not grounded, you will get a humming, buzzing noise, because you will induce noise into the magnets and then into the wire. So because of that, it's good practice to have the start of the coil to be ground. That way, if you do touch the magnets, it shunts that noise to ground. Now, the middle pickup on a Strat is wound in reverse so that they could keep the start of the coil at ground. You don't have to do that if the pickups are covered. On a Fender Mustang, the pickups are covered because there's a phase switch, you reverse the polarity, and you could end up with that humming issue. So that's the reason why that's done. So I don't really wind in opposite directions. The Shat winder originally had a platen on each side. It doesn't have that anymore because it's direct drive now. There's a DC motor in there. So this is the way I do it. And I'm just using double stick foam tape. I don't have fancy. I do have some little things that hold certain kinds of bobbins, like if I'm winding like a jazz bass bobbin with the magnets in it, I have a thing that'll space them. So I'm wrapping wire, the magnet wire, around the tinned end of the wire here. And I don't know how many turns that is, but that's about what I do. I'm pulling the wire out of the way. Now I'm just going to solder this. You have to be careful. If you heat it up too much, the wire will break. You get a feel for it after a while. Once in a blue moon, I have a pickup where the start lead did not get a good solder connection here, but that's kind of rare. It sucks when it happens because you have to wind the pickup over again. But see, I'm just heating that up, and I can tell by looking at it, it's nice and shiny. And that has melted off the insulation off of the magnet wire. There's nothing more that needs to be done for that. I'm just going to clip this a little shorter. And that's it. That should be a good connection right there. I'm going to wind a couple more turns on here just for mechanical strength. And because these have magnets in them already, they just collected some steel wool dust, which I do not want in there. Let me get that out of there real quick. Wouldn't hurt anything, but you know, it's not something you want in there. So what I'm going to do is, my winder is winding in this direction. I actually have an arrow normally drawn on there, which isn't on there anymore, to remind myself. So I'm going to poke this wire out one of these holes. There's a hole in the bobbin here, and I'm going to bend that over a little bit, and it's going to go that way. So we're going to wrap a few wraps this way, and I'm going to get some tape. Just hold it here with this thing here. Got some paper tape. If you do wind Fender style pickups with the exposed magnets, you should really tape off the magnets. Fender didn't do it, but they also had lots of pickups that would fail after many years of Alnico magnets. As the name implies, the al part is aluminum, or aluminium if you pronounce it that way. Fun fact, the scientist who discovered aluminum named it aluminum, English scientist, and later it was changed to aluminium because aluminum sounded too old-fashioned, they thought. They liked the ending of the inium instead of aluminum, which was like alum. Everything had that kind of ending. But anyway, here we got our wire. But if you do wind Fender style pickups, you should put tape on the bobbin, on the magnets, because you will get a the aluminum and the copper, even though the copper has insulation on it, it will break down eventually, and you have what Seymour Duncan called intercoil corrosion, where the wire corrodes and it breaks. And a lot of this is because of like moisture, sweat, and things getting in there. Leo Fender actually patented wax potting as a way to stop that from happening. So I have my guides set here. Actually, they're already set to the right distance. I don't know if they're far enough in. So let me try doing this. I don't think it is. I think that has to move over a little. No, actually, that looks good. All right, so a P-base pickup has 10,000 turns of wire. So that's what we're going to do. A little background on the design philosophy of this base. I had wanted to build myself a P-base because I like P-bases. And I just wanted to use, I've been making magnets for years with neodymium magnets and all kinds of things. And I wanted to just make regular P-base pickups. These have regular Alnico magnets in them. I stuck the magnets in here already just for the heck of it. But I may do some different things. I'm not sure yet. I do have, if I can get them off the thing here, I do have little neodymium magnets that would fit into the bobbins, which I could try. But I don't know if I want to do that yet. But, I can put different pickups in the future. Right now, I'm making pretty much stock P-base pickups. And that should be good. Now it's just a matter of winding. I do not scatter. You see people doing these very exaggerated back and forth motions, and all you're going to do is make a whoa, and I broke wire. All you're going to do is make a really sloppy coil doing that. And my wire got hung up here on my spool. I don't know why. It happens, unfortunately. So we're going to start over. Okay, so I have reattached the wire in here. I'm going to change how this is coming out. I'm actually going to drill a hole close to the end of the flange here, so there's not so much of the hookup wire sticking out. I use my Dremel as a very small drill. Alrighty, so I'm going to thread this through this hole I just drilled. As soon as I find it. There it is. See, now it's coming out much closer to the bottom of the flange of the bobbin. I'm just going to bend this over with some hemostats here. I'm going to tape that down. This is just thin paper tape. You can get this in art supply stores, and I think they consider it drafting tape. It's paper. It's also nice for putting on the outside of bobbins that you want, pickups you wind. It looks good. That's coming out of here. Alrighty. It's just a straight piece of wire. That I'm going to cut off. What I didn't show is when I cut the wire off that had broken, I use surgical scissors. They're really good for getting in there and snipping off that stuff. Hopefully it doesn't get stuck in there. I don't know why it got stuck on the spool. Okay, I think that's feeling good. I'm going to start kind of slow. What I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted by wire breaking. Let me secure that piece of wire sticking off the end there. I don't scatter. You see people doing this very exaggerated back and forth. And what you end up with is a really loose, sloppy coil. And I don't think anybody really ever wound that way. And then you have, big commercial winders use machines, and they don't wind like that either. So what I do is I just do this as neatly as I can. I'm not paying attention to turn count, turns per layer. I think is, if you're winding by hand, you can't possibly count that, and I'm not even going to try. And the other thing is that, like, winding patterns, people think, well, the winding pattern matters, how the pickup sounds, and you can wind 50 identical single coil pickups. We'll say single coil because, there's one less coil to think about. But let's say you make 50 strap pickups. You wind all of them to 9,000 turns, and you're winding them by hand. And this is random. No matter what I do on this, I cannot absolutely repeat the way I'm laying the wire down here the next time. And those 50 pickups will sound the same. There won't be anything drastically different about any of them. So I think all this stuff about people worrying so much about oh, you have to have, and then if you're scattering on top of it, you're doing an even more random coil, and you're getting a lot of very long diagonal wraps and stuff. I just think it's that's kind of nonsense. This winder can go much faster. The problem is this particular counter starts to lose counts. If I go much past this speed, I am going to be replacing the counter. And this is using, I guess it's a reed switch. There's a magnet on the platen that the bobbin's on. And it can only go so fast, and it starts to bounce and it just stops counting. So this is about how fast I go. We're at 2,800 turns, and pickup winding, you wind to a fixed number of turns. You do not wind to resistance. Resistance is kind of a side effect of how many turns. Nobody ever designed a pickup, I want this to be 8K. No, they didn't do that. They might have wound 7,500 turns, and it came out to 8K. And, if you look at pickup, this is 10,000 turns of wire. Why 10,000? Why not 9,568? It's because it was a set number. They just came up with a number. A good example of that is a P90. A lot of them are 10,000 turns. Not all of them are. Some of them are less. But a lot of them were 10,000 turns. And around the time when the humbucking pickup was designed, Seth Lover figured, well, we're going to make basically a hum-canceling P90. So they took the 10,000 turns of a P90 and he divided it into two. So each coil on a PAF has 5,000 turns of wire. And that was it. There was no magic involved in there with the number. We're at 4,200 now. Takes me about 10 minutes to wind a coil at this speed, which is okay. It's kind of meditative. Every now and then, I might stop it and look at it and think, oh, that's going down nice. I don't really pay attention to it, because I've been doing this obviously for, like I said, 30 or 40 years, off and on. So I just, you get used to it. I'm holding the wire in 3 fingers for tension. I'm squeezing not too hard. If I squeeze too hard, I cannot stop this motor. The old Shatton winder, you could actually stop the motor by squeezing the wire hard. In this one, it would break the wire, or you stretch the wire. So I just have a good feel for, how it feels. And I'm up against the bottom of this little guide bar, and I'm going between these 2 little guide bushings. We're at 5,200 now. Leo Fender used on his winders for a drive belt, he used a rubber band. And the reason was the rubber band would slip a little. And when he set up his new winders at G&L, they also used rubber bands. He said that was part of his secret for winding. This original winder had was belt driven. This is direct drive, which has a lot more torque. You could not stop that with your hand without hurting yourself, which is kind of surprising. So we're almost at 6,000. We're at 6,000 winds now. So it's just, you just do this. It's, like I said, it's kind of meditative. I used to do this all day long, which gets monotonous. I started to build a CNC controlled winder, which I just never got around to. But I mean, it's like anything. This is, you could use a CNC to carve a guitar neck, or you could do it by hand. It's kind of fun doing it by hand. It's more work, but it's enjoyable if you like doing it. And this isn't so bad. But there's nothing magic here. You find if you make your own pickups, the very first pickups you make, unless you did something wrong, like have a short or a break in the wire, you can have a break in the wire and the pickup still works, which is a funny thing depending on where the break is. We're at 7,000 turns now. But it's your very first pickups will sound good. They'll sound like what you're expecting them to sound like. It's really not rocket science. The thing where it changes is the design of the pickup. I worked at DiMarzio for a while, and all their people don't realize all the parts in their pickups are really very custom. The pole piece screws look very normal, but they're not. They use lots of very custom parts, but it was the design that set it apart. A lot of people just copy what Fender and Gibson did, and they just keep repeating that over and over again. And I think that's kind of boring. Now I am winding a Fender P-bass pickup here. I'm not doing anything unusual. And like I said, in the future, I may decide to change the pickups and put something more unusual in there. But right now, I wanted to see what this is like with regular stock P-bass pickups, except I have plastic bobbins because it's easier. We're at 8,200 turns now. So, getting back to turn count, you don't wind to a resistance. I will check the resistance of this coil when it's done, so I have a good idea whether or not the coil's good. P-bass pickups usually about 11 or 12,000 ohms, so this should be about, half of that, 6,000 or so. We're coming up on 9,000 turns. But it was just kind of random, I think. People picked... Seth Lover has once said that they wound the PAFs until the bobbins were full, which he probably figured, they designed the bobbins, and they held about 5,000 turns of wire. It's kind of hard to get much more 42 AWG gauge wire on a PAF bobbin. At that point, you have to switch to thinner wire, like 43 or 44. We're at 9,600 turns. 97. And I'm just going to watch this as we get to 10,000, and I'm going to stop it. 98. 99. And bingo. 10,000. 10,006 is what we have. And this is what our coil looks like. It's nice and fat and juicy. These bobbins are a little taller than a real P-bass pickup. They're kind of squat, but that's kind of how they do them these days. So, next step is to attach the other wire. And we came out on that side. So, I'm going to take one of my black wires here that I have stripped. And I'm going to tin this. I'm going to do the same thing I did before when I started this. And I want this to come out on the same side, so I'm going to kind of do it from there, like that. And I'm just wrapping this around the wire that I just tinned about this many times. I'm kind of going in a straight line. I'm not bunching it all on top. It doesn't really matter, but that's probably a better way of doing it. And now we're going to solder that. I kind of solder it until, I shouldn't have my arm in the way. You start to see the wire got a little soft and the flux starts to bubble, and that should be it. I'm gonna break off this loose end and tape it down here, and we'll get, you would think I would have this prepared, wouldn't you? Get my meter out. It's my old trusty Radio Shack meter with stickers that my daughter put on there when she was little. And let's see what we got. It's 5,029. There he goes. So that's a good coil. And that wasn't hard at all. Now I'm going to, I have other tape here. I'm going to tape up the end of this and tape it into the coil. And then we're going to drop that in, that's two. We're going to drop it into wax. Usually I tape down the loose end first, which I didn't do. So I'm going to do that first. Bring it around this way. I lost my tape. I'm also laying the tape against the coil so that when I lay this tinned wire end, I'm laying that on the tape and not directly on the wire. And I'm going to stick it out one of these holes on the bottom that were already in the bobbin. And I'm going to wrap some more tape around it. And I'm using the purple because I like it. Like that. And like this. I'll burnished it down a little with my fingers. And here we have our wires coming out the bottom of the coil. Now I am going to wrap a rubber band around this from the bag of rubber bands. What's a suitable size rubber band? Maybe we'll try one of these little ones. Some of these rubber bands are old and they break, but that's okay. So, yeah, I want to get it on the tape. I'll do another one. Rubber bands are cheap. Big. Well, see, that's what I'm talking about. Breaking rubber bands. I want to keep it on the tape so it stays on. So here I got some rubber bands on there, and I'm going to drop it in my wax pot. It's a paraffin warmer made by Gigi, which is intended for people to put their hands in there, or their feet, or whatever. But this is what I use. It has paraffin wax. I do not use beeswax. And I'm just dropping that in there. And that's going to sit in there for 10 minutes. Okay, my timer went off while I was winding. So we will get a pickup out of the wax and we'll take a look at it. Just take it out and I let it drip a little bit. And I got it on a piece of paper towel. Just to sop up the excess, and that's our freshly wax potted coil. Just wiping the excess. You don't want a whole lot of wax on it. set that over there and let that cool off. And we will continue with number 2. In our next installment, I will finish the pickup covers and install them into the base. See you then.